Eating solid foods. We all have to learn how. But for this little guy and the adults in his life, it's a whole new adventure. Let's learn and start growing together.
Growing Together is brought to you by an underwriting grant from.
Life-changing experiences can happen in a second. Like the moment you learn you're pregnant, the University of Kansas Health System maternity care team in Great Bend has 4 physicians, including 2 OBGYN and 2 family medicine physicians. Learn more at kansashealthsystem.com/Great Bend Maternity.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, their goal is to make Kansans healthier. The Department of Pediatrics, our goal is to treat children and help them be well. So it's a natural partnership.
We're from here. We live in these communities. We get up out of bed every morning to make healthcare better in Kansas, and I can't think of a better way to do that for families and kids than by supporting K-Wichita Pediatrics.
Kansas Health Foundation, United Methodist Health Ministry Fund, Western Kansas Community Foundation, Northwest Kansas Economic Innovation Center.
At Southwind Bank, we are dedicated to helping generations grow, dream, and thrive. Southwind Bank, for generations. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Salina Pediatric Care at Salina Regional Health Center, offering care for infants, children, and adolescents. SalinaPediatricCare.com.
Danny and Janice Reichenborn, Wilson State Bank, La Pasadita Carniceria of Great Bend, and viewers like you, thank you.
Just when you got the hang of nursing or bottle feeding, baby's almost ready for solid foods. Baby-led weaning is a hot topic, so we'll explore the latest research and best practices for what's also known as responsive feeding or complementary feeding. Our guests, Brenda Bandy, Executive Director of the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition, and Monique Koerner, Cottonwood Extension District, take the guesswork out of getting infants started on solid food. Welcome to Growing Together. What is baby-led weaning or responsive feeding?
Well, I think if I could get started first, I would say that it's really listening to the child and allowing them to take the lead on the process. It's really more of a dance between the parent and the child, but it's really following the baby's cue, looking for signs of readiness, and then also letting them direct not only when they eat, but also how much they eat as well.
And what role does the adult play in baby-led weaning?
Setting the stage, putting out the buffet, if you will, and allowing the child then to make the decisions from there. As an adult, it's really our job to provide the environment for their success.
Okay. What are some of the potential drawbacks or benefits of a baby-led weaning approach?
So I think when you put the baby in the driver's seat, you can observe and watch for their developmental skills, see when they're ready to begin solid foods, maybe their likes, their dislikes, but the parent is always there watching, just making sure that they're safe and they're offering nutrient-dense foods and just being able to, be there for the child and keep them safe. And I think like the baby-led weaning has kind of taken some different definitions, I think. It doesn't just necessarily refer to weaning from breast or bottle, but the way that we start solid foods.
How does complementary feeding and breastfeeding impact the long-term and short-term development of baby?
Well, we know that the optimal nutrition for babies is breast milk. for around the first 6 months, and then for continuing at least 2 years thereafter. And so I think we don't often talk in terms of years and months when it comes to breastfeeding, but that's really what the recommendations are. So complementary feeding is just the beginning of a natural, gradual weaning process. So as soon as the child takes something other than breast milk or formula, it's the beginning of a weaning process that's measured in terms of long-term months or years. And so how does it impact their development? We know from a nutritional standpoint, and I know you're going to talk more about the nutritional piece, but from a developmental standpoint, it's really continuing to follow the baby's cues so that when they become an adult, they really understand their own hunger, and when they're full, something I wish I would have had, as a child, that ability to self-regulate is really what this is supporting. And breastfeeding gets off to a good start, and then complementary feeding after that allows the child to then recognize that the adult who's in charge is not going to be driving how much and when they eat.
And when do we know that baby's ready to start solid foods?
Yeah.
Do you want to catch that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about their developmental signs, and are they able to set up independently without needing a lot of support and structure? Have they lost some of this reflexive pushing their tongue out? That's all babies are born with that. It's a protective thing so they don't choke. But until they lose that reflex to push their tongue out, what's going to happen is you're just going to end up with all that solid food pushed right back out of their mouth, and it's a mess. So you just need to wait. But I can tell you sometimes we misinterpret readiness when, they grab the spoon that you're using, right? And you're like, oh, they must be ready for my mashed potatoes. But really what they're doing is they're just like, what's this cool shiny thing that you're using? Or if they grab the mashed potatoes and they're just playing with it, that's not a sign that they're ready to eat it. Now, if they grab my mashed potatoes and they're sucking it down, that's the sign. So to me, it's really about when we watch, what does the baby do with the food that they're given? Are they actually able to feed it themselves and keep it down without pushing it out of their mouth? Are they able to sit upright so there's not a choking hazard? And what would you add to that?
Yeah, just really watching those signs that baby is ready. One of the other things is using that palmer grasp, and then eventually getting to where we can use the pincher grasp as well. I think, with the baby-led weaning, we're getting away from the purees of mashing, really thinning foods, because that's what we have to do when babies still have that reflexive tongue thrust, is we have to puree it to get any of it down because they're not developmentally ready for it. So with the baby-led weaning, we're going to look at, thicker foods and those textures, because if we stay with the purees for too long, we kind of miss that window of opportunity.
What are some good routines when you start with the baby-led weaning?
So you always want to start with breastfeeding first, before the solid foods, at least for the first year or so, from that 6 months to a year. And that's just because the complementary foods are just really for fun right now. Exposing them to different foods and textures and tastes is what we're looking for when we start the complementary foods, because that breast milk is really going to still provide the basis of their nutrition.
How would you suggest that parents and caregivers get started with the solids?
So we usually suggest that we start with whole foods and as close to their natural state as possible. So some good first foods to try would be things like sweet potatoes, avocados, bananas, and we'll talk more about how to prepare those later. But it used to be the iron fortified cereals, but those are very processed. And when we're looking at those long-term benefits of feeding our kids whole foods, getting them used to those whole foods rather than those processed foods. And, with processed foods, I feel like there's more of a chance of contamination, things like that. So if we're utilizing whole foods, sometimes we have to use some things that are minimally processed, but really getting babies used to tasting whole foods, and so they're not necessarily attracted to the processed things that are full of preservatives and sugars and salts and fats and things like that, which really don't satisfy us, and we tend to overeat them more.
When we start solid foods, how much should we offer, and how much milk should we give them?
Well, if I could take this one, I often describe the first few months of introducing adult food as like a balance. You know, if you picture that old-time balance scale, where it has been breast milk or formula has been all they've been getting, and there's zero solid foods. What you want is slowly over time for that balance to go like this, right? And as I said earlier, this is measured in terms of years, right? And so how much, it's a gradual reduction. I'm so glad you mentioned breastfeed first, because a baby who is not hangry, we all know what that is, right, is more willing to try something new. And I think the biggest mistake I made when I had my kids is putting them in a high chair, giving them something new, and expecting them to go, this is wonderful, when really they were hungry. And to try something new, I don't want to try something new if I'm really hungry. So I think we have to dial down the hunger, start with what they know, which is at this point all breast milk, and that will gradually reduce as they get more calories from their other sources of food. And one thing that people may not know is that the breastfed infant has actually been tasting the family food in breast milk. It smells and tastes like your lasagna or the meatloaf or whatever it is that you've been making. So when they do get that first handful of food, it's not strange and different. And so that gradual, how much milk will they be getting? Of course, if you're breastfeeding, you're not actually measuring it, but you'll notice that there might be fewer needs for nursing as their calories come up with the solid foods. Sometimes, yeah, yes.
And what do you think we should do if baby is not really taking to anything?
So it usually takes 10 times, maybe 15 times for babies to even begin to try something. So patience is really the key. And one of the other main points about baby-led weaning is allowing them to do it themselves rather than feeding the child. So they're going to be able to choose what they want to try and taste. And we're really looking at small amounts. We're not going to offer them large amounts. A tablespoon or two of a food to try in the beginning. And if they want more, then we can give them more.
Yeah. What are some convenient choices when we're short on time?
Whatever I've just made for dinner
exactly.
is what goes on the high chair.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah, don't overthink it. Whatever I'm already preparing for our family meal, rather than maybe mixing it all together in that casserole, I just keep a little bit of it out and then put it on the high chair so that it's maybe not seasoned or mixed in with other things. And so it really is, don't overthink it. And using the whole foods, you can cook a lot of foods like in the microwave, and to get them in that soft consistency. I know you're going to be talking about later the preparation of that, but really don't overthink it, don't panic, and don't worry. And I think when you start feeding your child not from a jar, but from just bits and pieces, the stress level goes down because I'm not looking at the jar saying, oh my gosh, you didn't finish this. You have to finish this. Rather than putting out, say, a handful of cooked carrots or, ground beef or something.
Now, you mentioned that babies can taste and kind of already know some of the flavors that mom's ingesting. Does that mean that babies can handle spices and really intense flavors?
You'd be surprised. Yeah. Yes.
We don't really, go ahead and flavor your foods. Yeah. The only thing that I would be wary of would be super spicy foods, but if it's part of your culture, start mild and then add up, because we don't want it to be a negative experience for babies, something super hot and then they have a negative experience and don't want to continue eating. But if you want to use some spices in your food, I think that's perfectly fine.
What are some of your top tips for food safety and choking prevention?
So I guess starting out with the way that you prepare your foods. So fruits and vegetables, we'd want to peel them, make them soft, so probably cooking them, and then cutting them up in a way that is helpful for them. So we don't want like hard round pieces. When we're cutting foods, we want to, in the beginning, cut them in like a matchstick type, like not really bigger than your finger, and long because they've got the palmar grasp, so they can grab that piece and feed it to themselves. Once they get a little bit older, around 9 months, we can do like smaller chunks where they can use their pincher grasp and feed themselves.
Mm-hmm. Anything you would like to add?
My test, if it had been cooked enough that I could mash the food with my tongue against the roof of my mouth.
The squish test.
The squish test, yeah. Yeah, if I didn't have to use my teeth, it was probably soft enough.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to both of you for sharing all your insights today.
Mm-hmm.
For a review and more information, here's where you can find evidence-based resources designed for infant caregivers. Up next, we'll explore cooking for infants and get some ideas for healthy first foods.
Let's start with food safety. We want to make sure everything is clean. We want to start with washing our hands and making our surfaces clean. We want to make sure that we're separating our ready-to-eat foods from our raw foods. We want to make sure that we're cooking our foods to the proper temperature and make sure we're putting them away in a quick manner within 2 hours.
How do you want to get started?
We're going to start with the sweet potato today. So when we start with ready-to-eat foods, we want to make sure that we're chopping them up so baby can easily eat them. So we want to start with giving them small matchstick type to eat. So something like this. As they get older, we can chop it a little bit smaller and they can use their pincher grasp. Same way with the avocado. We've already cut the avocado so they can pick it up and eat it and bring it to their mouth like this. When they get a little bit older, we can dice it up like the sweet potato.
When they're ready to handle the soft, mushy foods, what do we try next?
So we want to move quickly through the fruits and vegetables. We want to get to the iron-rich foods and the zinc-rich foods because babies lose their iron reserves around 6 months. So if you want to do plant-based iron-rich foods, we're going to look to legumes and beans. Now, beans can be a choking hazard, so we want to make sure that they're cooked. And then we just want to make sure that we squish them a little bit so that babies don't choke on them. So we've got some different types of beans here. Just kind of press them down like that and make them ready for baby. So they're not a choking hazard. The next food that we can move to is hamburger or beef. So whether it's a steak or a hamburger, again, we want to cut it in the longer strips so babies can bring it to their mouth. Like that.
Now, do we have to be worried about giving them certain allergen foods at certain times?
Right. So the recommendations on that has changed. We want to be introducing these foods as soon as possible. Unless there's allergies in the family, then it would be a conversation with your healthcare provider. So here we could take a slice of bread and cut it. And then we want to spread, peanut butter is one of those choking hazards, so we want to make sure that we're spreading the peanut butter nice and thin when we're exposing it to the baby. Another option with bread would be we can mix some avocado and fish together, and it can also be fed to the baby on a piece of bread. Chicken is the same way, so that would be another iron-rich food. You can serve it shredded like this, or you can cut it in more of a chunk so baby can really work on those skills of chewing when they're putting it in their mouth.
Now, is there a time for purees when we've moved to solid foods?
So you can start with purees. Typically, though, you want to move quickly through those, so only spend 2 or 3 weeks on purees or mashed foods. We want to move to more of the matchstick type foods pretty quickly because they're working on their jaws and their muscles and learning how to chew.
Now, are there foods that we absolutely need to avoid?
Yes, so honey is one of those foods that we need to avoid until the child is at least 1 year old. And then we also want to make sure that we're not giving them foods that are round or hard that can be a choking hazard. So those are some examples that we have here. Another thing that has been very popular are the pouches. So those have a time and a place. They might be handy for traveling, something like that. But we want to make sure that kids aren't getting those on a daily basis because, again, they're not utilizing their developmental skills of chewing and learning how to move foods properly from the front of their mouth to the back of their mouth. So most of the time you'd want to take those out, maybe put them in a dish and use a spoon.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you.
Here's a recap of recommendations of internationally recognized doctors, nutritionists, and researchers for getting your baby started on a well-balanced diet of solid foods. Feed infants human milk only for the first 6 months and continue through the first 2 years of life while introducing solid foods. Feed infant formula for the first 6 months and continue through the first year of life while introducing solids. Mothers are encouraged to ask their doctor about taking supplemental vitamin D. Introduce infants to nutrient-dense complementary foods at about 6 months old, especially those with iron and zinc. Avoid unhealthy foods high in sugar, salt, and trans fats. Introduce infants to potentially allergenic foods along with other complementary foods. Encourage infants and toddlers to consume a variety of complementary foods, including legumes, nuts, seeds, and seafood, and beverages to meet energy and nutrient needs. Establish a healthy beverages pattern, avoiding sugar-sweetened drinks. Children 6 to 23 months of age should be responsibly fed. Do either of you have any additional recommendations?
I would like to address 2 things. I do think that we can look to the World Health Organization as a great source of information. It really gives us a global picture on how everyone feeds their babies. So I think that's an excellent resource. I also wanted to touch on that vitamin D recommendation that you mentioned as well. We know that it's important, especially for breastfed infants, that they receive either the infant receives vitamin D supplementations or the mother does, not both. So we want to make sure that they're talking to the healthcare provider about vitamin D supplementation.
Another resource that we can look to is the AAP or healthychildren.org, and they also have a new book out called Baby Leads the Way. So that can be a resource for parents, as well as the Leche League International. Their website has information on breastfeeding and complementary feeding as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again to our guests, Brenda Bandy and Monique Koerner. To connect with more about responsive feeding, breastfeeding, and baby-led weaning, check out our website and social media. For Growing Together, I'm Dallas Arp.
Growing Together is brought to you by an underwriting grant from
Life-changing experiences can happen in a second. Like the moment you learn you're pregnant, the University of Kansas Health System maternity care team in Great Bend has 4 physicians, including 2 OBGYN and 2 family medicine physicians. Learn more at kansashealthsystem.com/Great Bend Maternity.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, their goal is to make Kansans healthier. The Department of Pediatrics, our goal is to treat children and help them be well. So it's a natural partnership.
We're from here. We live in these communities. We get up out of bed every morning to make healthcare better in Kansas, and I can't think of a better way to do that for families and kids than by supporting Wichita Pediatrics.
Kansas Health Foundation, United Methodist Health Ministry Fund, Western Kansas Community Foundation, Northwest Kansas Economic Innovation Center.
At Southwind Bank, we are dedicated to helping generations grow, dream, and thrive. Southwind Bank, for generations. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Salina Pediatric Care at Salina Regional Health Center, offering care for infants, children, and adolescents. SalinaPediatricCare.com.
Danny and Janice Reichenborn, Wilson State Bank, La Pasadita Carniceria of Great Bend, and viewers like you, thank you.